Thank you for joining us today at the Faith-Based Security Network. I'm your host, Matt Stedham, and joining me today is the author of The First 30 Seconds, Mr. Ed Monk. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Glad to have you on here. So we're mentioning your book, The First 30 Seconds. Again, I'm a fan. I've broken the spine on it. It's having it open and highlighting stuff and reading. Fantastic book. But before we get into the book, I'd like for people to know exactly who you are and what you do. So Ed, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I grew up here where I am now in a small city in Arkansas. I left here when I was 18, went in the military, the Army, where I served 24 years active duty. The last 20 of that was as a armor officer, so I was in units with tanks and cavalry. Retired from the Army in 2007, immediately went into teaching public high school, which I did for the next 4 years, which had a lot to do with why I got into studying this topic of the active shooter. And then I was a deputy in Louisville, Kentucky for 2 years, moved back here to my home state of Arkansas in 2010, became a part-time law enforcement officer here, and also about 2007, I started training, doing firearms instructing, which I've continued to do. My brother built a facility here in Arkansas, so when I moved back here in 2010, we have a training facility here called Last Resort. But shortly after I got into teaching public school, 2008, 2009, around in there, because I realized how badly we were prepared for the active shooter, how bad that churches, schools, and businesses were preparing for it, which was why we continued to see high victim counts. I started studying it, researching, looking into it, wargaming it through the eyes of an Army officer who wargames coming battles to make them as least bad as possible. And that led to me providing training, designing and providing training to churches, businesses, schools, law enforcement, and for conferences for those audiences. And then that led into a whole bunch of people saying, when are you going to write the book? When are you going to write the book? So once I had some months that I wasn't traveling a lot, I finally put pen to paper, old school.
So you're an expert that can speak on this subject from various levels. Again, you've seen it in various contexts, and your military experience has helped you plan out or learn how to plan out responses, considering those sort of things. So I really do consider you the expert on the active shooter problem in the United States. And if you're a member of the FBSN, if you've been to our SOS conferences, Ed's a familiar face to you. He spoke last year in San Antonio. He's also speaking this year at our conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But let's talk about your book for just a second, because in this book, The First 30 Seconds, which you can find on Amazon, I want you to realize what Ed is writing this for. He says this, I'm reading straight from his book. He says, "This book is a wake-up call. It is public notice that our nation has been horribly failing to honestly, logically, and realistically address and respond to the active shooter problem in a way that will minimize victims." And before we started recording here today, I was telling Ed I recommended his book to a security leader at a church this week because that church was, again, approaching everything they did with all the red flags you say to avoid. So Ed, could you talk just a little bit about how the United States and our response to the active shooter threat, how have we been failing in properly preparing?
I grew up in Arkansas, so I'm somewhat familiar with tornadoes. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a scientist that studies weather, but if an organization said our policy, if there's a tornado warning here where we are, we're all going to get up on the roof of this building and stay up there until the tornado warning is over, I think most people would say that doesn't sound right to me. We need to look into this and maybe come up with something better. But for 40 years, America has been doing basically that for the active shooter. They policies of lockdown. The lockdown drill is a horrible drill that was never designed for an active shooter, but we liked it because it was easy to drill and it didn't trigger anybody. So we just hammered that square peg into a round hole. And that's what we're doing now. Like I said, when I started teaching 10 days after I retired out of the Army, I was told as a brand new teacher, if we have an active shooter here in the building, your job as the teacher is to gather all of your kids in your classroom and pack them into the corner of your classroom in a really tight group so that when the shooter comes in your room, he won't even have to aim. You've made his job as easy as you possibly could have made it. So what they were telling me to do wasn't just not the best idea, it was the absolute worst idea. And we'd been under active shooter attacks in America. We'd seen them now at that time for over 30 years. And the best idea that the best brains could come up with was to pack really tight in a tight corner and wait till you're shot. So anything we're uncomfortable with, and most people, especially educators, but most people are uncomfortable with violence, with giving violence and receiving violence. Things we're uncomfortable with, we outsource to somebody else. If you don't want to cut your grass, you pay some guy to cut your grass. If you don't want to change the oil in your vehicle, you go to Jiffy Lube and let them change the oil, let them get their hands dirty. Well, schools and churches and other places, they're uncomfortable with the thought of them doing violence. So we outsource that to the police. And that'll work. The cops will eventually show up when they're called about an active shooter. And if he's still active, they will eventually stop him. But the problem is time. The active shooter is going to start with surprise by shooting his first victim. He's going to shoot a new victim every few seconds of his attack. So the 911 system fails us, and it has failed us for 40 years because someone first has to realize that it's an active shooter attack, then feel safe enough to access their phone, feel safe enough to dial the number, have it connect, have it ring, have it be answered by a 911 operator, explain the active shooter attack that they're witnessing. Then the 911 operator is going to contact the police. Then the police are going to travel there and then do some kind of action. All that time it takes for all those phone calls, radio calls, and travels allows the active shooter to shoot a lot of people. So that's why we see so many of the active shooter attacks end in victim counts in the 20s and the 30s and sometimes the 40s, and in the case of Pulse nightclub, 102 people. So if you know how the shooter's going to shoot, it's very simple. It's very mathematically simple. He has to be stopped quickly after his first shot. And there's no way to call cops and get them there in a short amount of time. So it leaves us with a conclusion that people don't want to hear because they're uncomfortable with violence. And that is the victims there, the people he came to shoot, they have to stop him. It's just blatantly clear, but it's simple. You know, if I'd have written a book that said, hey, if your kitchen catches on fire, if you put the fire out right there, you'll have far less damage than if you go get on a phone, call 911, they call the fire department, and I have a volunteer fire department where I live, then the firemen show up, then the firemen drive to your house. Well, sure, they'll put out the fire once they get there, but the house will have a lot more damage. If I'd have written a book that said that, no one would buy it because they'd say, well, that's pretty obvious to anybody. The active shooter thing should have been too all along, but we don't want it. We don't want the truth that math gives us. So we pretend that if we hide and try to survive, the cops will come save us, and they will come and they will eventually stop it if it's still going. We're just going to have a lot more victims. That's what we've been doing wrong. We've been having passive hunker down and survive policies instead of vicious counterattack immediately policies. And that's the difference between a handful of victims and 20 and 30 victims.
Absolutely. And I think churches are starting to get to that understanding that, you know, we need to do something in the meantime. Yeah, let's get the good guys coming, but we need to do something and step into that gap. But something that stood out to me as I was rereading this book was the problem with the 911 system. There is a delay in it. Now, again, volunteer firefighter here, okay? So don't not call 911. If you got a problem, we'll show up, we'll deal with it. But there's things you can do, just like Ed was saying, there's things you can do in the meantime to mitigate that. But there's a delay in the 911 system. The way that works causes a delay, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. So two instances that stood out to me. One I'm going to read right from your book, but one of them is the Virginia Tech incident that I think most people are familiar with, that shooting that happened at Virginia Tech. And what a lot of people don't know is the police presence that was there and how quickly they got there. Ed, could you tell us I could summarize it, but I'm going to let you do it. Summarize exactly what we ended up seeing with the Virginia Tech incident.
Yeah, the Virginia Tech incident, he did most of his shooting and killing in an academic building, but he actually shot and killed 2 people before that attack, several hours before that, in a dorm. So we had a double homicide, but didn't know anything about it other than somebody killed 2 people. So out of an overabundance of caution, both University of Virginia or Virginia Tech called out their SWAT team, and Blacksburg, Virginia called out their SWAT team. And so they're called up, they're gearing up, they're already standing by when he kicks off in the academic building, chains the doors shuts from the inside and starts shooting people on the second floor. And so when they called 911 about that second shooting that started in the academic building, not only did they get cops there quickly, they got members of SWAT team there really quickly. 3 minutes after the 911 call, which, I mean, you'd normally expect 40 minutes to an hour for SWAT to show up, but they got SWAT there in 3 minutes, which is just unheard of. And of course, we still had an extremely high victim count, partly because someone has to call 911, then they have to call the cops, and the cops have to travel there, but also because the shooter had chained the doors closed from the inside. So even though they got there 3 minutes after the 911 call, it took them another 5 minutes to get in the building by shooting hinges off the door.
Absolutely.
So every few seconds of this is it matters.
It absolutely
That's what people
matters.
don't want to hear.
It absolutely matters. And so, again, fast, probably the fastest SWAT response team ever, because of just the way that it played out. They happened to be there, yet they still couldn't get inside. What if there had been somebody inside that was prepared to deal with that could have dealt with it in the first 30 seconds? That would have changed things very drastically. The other one that I don't think people are very familiar with is the Fairchild Air Force Base shooting, and Officer Andy Brown, who ended up stopping this active shooter. And I'm reading straight from your book now. This is page 129 if you want to follow along at home. But the important lesson from this that Ed summarizes, he says this: even with the fastest 911 call I know about, 46 seconds after the shooting started, a very quick dispatch from the 911 call, 16 seconds, an unbelievably fast, aggressive, and skilled police response, 92 seconds, travel and action, the active shooter still shot 26 people. And again, I think that that's an illustration of even in those seconds, those are precious seconds, you look at that and you go, man, that's quick. That is very fast. But every second that ticks off the clock, evil is continuing to attack. And so we need something there prepped to deal with that quickly. So, Ed, what would you suggest a church consider? Well, not even consider. What is the answer to a church that says, well, we've got 911 on call, and I think we can just call the police and hope that they'll deal with it?
And they probably will. The problem will be the time. So the question is, do you want a handful of victims, or do you want 20 or 30 victims? That's the only difference. In 3 cases, the 3 cases that I know of where churches had armed volunteer members present as a welcoming party for the active shooter, in all 3 cases, we had single-digit victims, because the active shooter once he pulled out and fired his gun, he was identified very quickly and stopped very quickly by the armed team. Now, that's a 100% success rate. Very few things have a 100% success rate. You know, if you had a very ill child with a very horrible disease, and medical doctors said, it's a horrible disease, but we've got this treatment that so far has a 100% success rate, you'd beg, please give me that treatment. That's the one we want, the one with the 100% success rate. Now, it's only 3, but that's 100% of 3. It's 3 out of 3. It's worked every time it's been tried. So having armed volunteers there by far is the best way. How many do you need? It depends on how big your church is. Little small church, 2 would probably be minimum adequate, 1 inside and 1 outside, because about half of these church attacks start in the parking lot. So we need people outside to stop the half of the attacks that start out there. If we can stop him out there, our chances of a low victim count are extremely high mathematically. If he doesn't start shooting until he's inside, doesn't expose his gun until he's inside, then we still have to stop him. It's just more dangerous and a little more complicated. So that's it. This is a very simple problem. It is scary and it's deadly, but it's actually very simple. As soon as we identify the active shooter as an active threat, we immediately do counter violence as quickly as we can and as deadly as we can until he's stopped. Very simple. It's just, do we have the stomach to do it? I ran into a lot of resistance with churches up until Sutherland Springs. the Sutherland Springs attack, when that guy shot 46 out of the 50 people that were in that building. And after that, way more churches that I went to had gotten past the resistance of, well, we don't want to be violent, turn the other cheek, forgiveness. After they saw that, it's like, yeah, sure, the cops did eventually show up to that church, but by the time they got there, 46 of the 50 people had been shot and quite a few of them died. So that woke a lot of churches up. It's like, if we don't protect ourselves, he is going to shoot a lot of us before the cops get here. It's really simple math.
Very, very simple math. And so again, I highly, highly recommend jump on Amazon, order Ed's book, The First 30 Seconds. Again, it really does a fantastic job of outlining the problem of the active shooter and some to consider as you're starting to put this plan together in your faith-based organization. So Ed, I'd like to talk to you again about our upcoming SOS conference. It's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky. You can find out more about that on our website, fbsinamerica.com. But Ed's going to be one of our speakers again this year, and we're excited to have him. So Ed, can you tell us just a little bit about what topic you're going to be covering at the SOS event?
Well, surprise, surprise, it's going to be the active shooter problem. And as I go around the country, I just went out to Coronado Island, California, off the San Diego coast, and talked to a big church out there that had a private school. I also did Shadow Mountain that's out there. And I always tell them, you need to get involved with Faith-Based Security Network. It makes no sense for every church, big and small, to figure out this security problem on their own, isolated, when you've got this national organization where churches can share their ideas, their policies, their problems that they've fixed, and ask questions. We can't figure this problem out. Who out there can fix it? Who's dealt with it before? Give us some ideas. It's such a great organization for that. But what I've proposed is I'll do a presentation on a church-focused study of the active shooter on one of the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, one of the days of the conference. They have not told me which day yet. So that'll look at, again, the failure that we've talked about, but also some of the successes, and show the drastic difference between churches that didn't counterattack the active shooters but instead called 911 and churches that did. And there's just such a drastic difference in the victim count. But then we will end that by saying individuals, whether you're at your church or you're at Walmart after church, wherever you are, you have three options. And in order that they should be considered is fight, flee, barricade. Fight, flee, barricade for every individual. What I've proposed for the pre-event, which I believe is going to be on Wednesday, is presentation for those of us who carry pistols, whether you're an on-duty cop, off-duty cop, or an armed citizen. Those of us who carry pistols in public and we think we will, or we very likely will get involved to stop the active shooter with that pistol, that's going to zero in on that. So the people that pretty sure ahead of time we're going to choose fight and we carry a pistol, the most optimal tool in public for that. So we will look at training issues, mental preparedness, gear issues, problems with the environment of that specific fight, of fighting an active shooter in a public place, the fact you'll be outgunned, the fact it could be a long distance. We'll talk about Rule 4, Round 2, and the monkey. Safety, Rule 4, problems of shooting beyond, people that are on the other side of your target. Round 2 of the fight, meaning just because you put them on the ground doesn't mean they won't get back up or keep shooting from the ground. So we have to be ready to fight round 2 of the fight. And then the monkey is the stress, not only of the fact that you're in a deadly fight for yourself, but every few seconds you don't find, engage, and stop the active shooter, another innocent person is going to get shot. So the pre-event on Wednesday will specifically focus in on issues for those of us who carry pistols and want to better prepare mentally, physically, skill, and tactical-wise for that. And during the main conference, I believe I'll be giving probably my presentation, I don't know how long yet, on a church-focused study of the active shooter problem and how to minimize victims.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing you at a couple other trainings around, maybe between now and then. But Ed, thank you so much for joining us again today, coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you on the channel.
Thank you so much, Matt. And if I can help anybody, any church out there, don't hesitate to contact me.
Absolutely. So speaking of, you have any classes coming up in the near future that maybe some of our viewers would like to sign up for?
Well, I leave on the 22nd of January. I'll be at a church in Brandon, Mississippi, which is outside of Jackson, Mississippi, is hosting me. A church and a synagogue up in the Allentown, Pennsylvania area is going to host me at the end of this month. I believe like the 29th or the 31st and the 1st of January and the 1st of February. Those are the two church events, and a church in mid-February out in Mesa, Arizona is hosting me. So there's three pretty close in church events that I know that I'm doing.
Absolutely. Well, how can people find out exactly where you're going to be on Facebook page?
Yeah, on my Facebook page, Ed Monk, EDMONK, they can look up about every 1 to 2 weeks, probably every 10 days to 14 days, I post a list that goes out probably about 4 to 5 months of all the places that I'll be giving training on the active shooter. And it's literally coast to coast. Again, I left San Diego a few days ago. I'll be in, off the top of my head, I'll be in Maine, New York, Texas, Washington State, Florida. So it's literally coast to coast.
You stay pretty busy doing that. So, well, again,
but,
good.
I enjoy doing it. So it's not, if people say you travel a lot, that must be horrible. No, I go where I choose to go there. I don't have a boss telling me where to go. If I'm somewhere, it's because somebody asked me to go. I wanted to go, and it's people I wanted to talk to. So I'm very blessed in what I get to do.
Awesome. Well, we're blessed in having you here today. Again, thanks, Ed, for your time. Thank you so much for being who you are and sharing this message far and wide. And thank you guys very much for watching today on the Faith-Based Security Network YouTube channel. Again, you can find out more about the FBSN by visiting the website here at the bottom of the screen, fbsnamerica.com. We are a membership organization, and so you might be able to join our membership. It is a vetted membership. You got to be a part of a faith-based organization and working in leadership of that, or in security. So it's a safe place to share ideas, to coordinate with one another. And so we invite you to join us here at the FBSN. In the meantime, may the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he turn his presence towards you and give you peace. Take care.